So it's almost the end of March in Ohio, and temperatures look like they're going to be pretty good from here on out. Don't really expect them to fall into the mid-20s or anything like that again. If it gets into the upper 20s, that's alright, because I'm going to be using frost cover for anything I put outside at the moment. And that's the Agro, so what's it called? It's Agrobond. That's the name of the company that I have the fabric from. And they're rated down to, I think, 29 degrees. But you can double it up and get even a lower temperature rating. But you can see here, I have my little cabbage plants in pine containers. They're wider than the pine container. These are the purple variety. And I have a variety of lettuce plants that are large enough to get out. I wouldn't put them out in the field unless they're at least this size. You know, about 2 inches in diameter. Give them a bit of a start, so bugs and possibly too much rain or whatnot won't kill them off. And you can see I got a bunch of cabbage plants, green ones back here and purple ones, but you probably can't tell because of the light. Notice too that I have these yellow sticky cards that I've cut and attached them to some straws and put in a few. Those are for fungus gnats. Anytime I'm doing organic growing indoors, I've always gotten some fungus gnats, and you can see this one from back here. You can see I got 3 gnats on that one, 3 or 4. You always want to catch those gnats before they start a serious infestation. They like the wet soil. They like especially wet conditions. If you can manage your water well, you won't see hardly any problems from it, because they don't like it when the top of the soil gets dried out. But if you don't use the cards and you see them, you're eventually going to have some problems. I can actually see one. If you get good, you can catch them with your hands too. See, there's a dead one right there. So let's take these out to the field, and I'll show you what my raised rows look like. This is my garden area outside. You see I have it fenced off with 7-foot tall, but actually it's more like 6-foot tall deer fencing with some posts. And that'll prevent deer from getting into it. Never had a deer jump it, but they most certainly could if they really, really wanted to. My garden measures about 90 feet by a little over 30 feet. And you can see I have the entire space covered with landscape fabric for the most part. Landscape fabric really is the best thing for controlling weeds, although, you know, if you get a hole in it, you still have weeds pop up. And weeds too can still get on top of it and grow through if you have enough of enough dirt and junk on top of the fabric. But rains usually wash most of that down, and plus too, I kind of clean the garden out with a rake every year. Some of this fabric is older than the rest, and different qualities too. This stuff right here, you can see, still pretty tough. This is the DeWitt Pro 6, I think it's called. And I've had it for about 5 years. Just kept on using it again and again. I've cut different holes at different spacings, and of course, you know, weeds come up through those older holes that I don't use, but not too many. Over here is another type called DeWitt Pro Black, and you can see it's still pretty tough. I think this is probably 2 or 3 years old. Probably 3 actually, because I don't think I replaced it last year. The DeWitt Pro Black is what I recommend you to get. It's the highest quality, lowest price. If you buy the stuff like at Lowe's or Home Depot, usually it's not very good quality. It might say it lasts for like 4 or 5 years, but I've never had that stuff last past 1 year. And actually the winds have tore it up pretty bad too in just a year. you can go, I mean, feel for yourself. If it falls apart like tissue paper, you can be assured that it's not going to hold up outside. Now you can see throughout the winter, I never rolled any of this up. I've done that before, but I kind of see it actually unnecessary. And I think when you roll it up and leave it outside, it probably breaks it down more because you kind of have like a little bit of compost in it. All this junk, no way to get it all off. So also too, you see I have some posts here. These are just 2-foot sections of rebar that I've pounded into the ground. It's about a foot sticking out. I have a set at the row, and the rows are all 4 feet wide. And every 5 feet down, I have another set of posts. And I use those for these 8-foot lengths of bent over PVC. You can see I've used some actual steel conduit, galvanized steel conduit for these posts, which won't last as long. That's why I recommend getting the rebar. The rebar is a little more pricey, but it's going to last a lot longer. And these just slide right over top of it, and they won't come off. Just make sure when you bend these that you bend a little bit here and there on both sides before you slide it on. Otherwise you'll have this result where it kinks on you, which still work fine like that because the cover will still slide over. But if you have any weight hanging down, you can see that's going to flex it down. Also too, when the time comes, I'll be installing my drip irrigation. I'll use the length of this irrigation too to measure out my spacing appropriately, because this is 8-inch spacing. This is 5/8 of an inch drip tape, I believe Toro brand. Move this out of the way. And you can see, yeah, every 8 inches there's a little drip emitter. I don't remember exactly how many gallons per hour. I think it's like 1/3 of a gallon per hour or something like that. Hooked up to a 1/2-inch main line. We'll get more into that. So the first thing I got to do is peel back this section of landscape fabric, because this is the row I'm going to use for cabbage and lettuce. And it looks like maybe the spacing on some of these holes is already 18 inches, so hopefully I won't have to cut anything new. But when I pull it back, I got a nice big 8 cubic feet, or actually I think this is actually a 10 cubic foot cart of 3-year-old mushroom compost. It's got sawdust compost. You can see roots are through it. That's not a problem. They'll rot away. You have to go through use a hoe to go through it initially, and tear it apart, and then shovel it. And I can see actually some remnants of old cottonseed hulls. So I haven't used those in a while. I think it's probably actually some old hulls I threw in there just to compost. But very rich in organic matter, holds water well while still draining well. It's very loose, you can see too. You can't buy that in bag soil or bag compost. You can't beat out homemade compost. But very rich. I only need to put about a 1/2-inch layer down the entire row. And then I'll pull out my tiller and give it a tilling. I'll show you all about that too. See how the wind has tore up some of this older fabric that I can really peel apart like tissue paper. I'll replace it this year, and this old fabric I'll double over, and it'll become another layer of footpaths that I'll probably have to take out in a few years when it's really thick of fabric. But the old stuff makes a good footpath, keep the weeds down there. If you remember too, when I moved into this place, this was all heavy clay, and this will be the 3rd year of adding organic matter to it. And the soil has improved quite a bit every year. So if you got heavy clay soil, best thing to do is keep adding compost to it like composted leaves, sawdust blocks from your mushrooms. Any kind of compost will work well. Just make sure it's fully composted. I've got my compost laid down. Took 2 of those large dump cart fulls to cover the entire about 80-90 foot row. If you're wondering about that dump cart, it's electrical powered. It's great. Really all it is a wheelchair transmission and battery and a motor powerful enough to run it. So I paid $2 grand for it. You could probably actually build something cheaper than that, but I use it all the time. You see my rototiller. This is an old 70 models, 8 horsepower Briggs & Stratton on it. It's an old Toro horse, I think. Probably the label's been all worn off, but I've used it quite a bit. It's had a lot of use throughout the years. I've already done some spring maintenance to it, taking off this plug here and this plug with this unscrews and filling it full of 90 weight gear lubricant, which you got to be careful of. These things, if you don't keep them lubed up, you'll end up tearing the gears up in them, and it's a real hassle to fix things then. Runs off 2 belts. Want to have good fresh belts that don't snap on you in the middle of work. If I take it back under here, flip it up, you can see the tines on it. You want to keep your tines clean. I got a little bit of roots still left on it, but if you got a whole bunch of roots wrapped up and stuff like that, you're not really tilling very well, and it's going to take more time to work. I usually use like a pair of angle snips, metal snips, or scissors, or anything you can get in there to cut it apart, or just a knife and just cut it with a knife and get it apart. Or knock any big clods of heavy clay on it. When you're first tilling up fresh soil, you're going to want to use only about a couple inches down. You can see this has this adjuster right here, and every little notch is an inch. Because I'm tilling up some already pretty loose soil, I can already take it down to 3. But tilling new ground, you always want to start up just a couple inches and go over it about 4 or 5 times. The slower you till it up, the better. That's less work on the tiller and more thorough breaking up of the ground, because tilling is not just about tearing the ground up to a certain depth. It's also about taking the clods of soil and breaking them up into finer and finer bits. And so even when you get down to the depth you want to keep on tilling and tilling until pretty much when you walk behind the tiller, it's soft and loamy. You can see your footprints and you sink in. Now, because it's a little wet, it might be a little rough to till this up. Ideally, you want to till your rows up as dry as dirt as possible. It's a lot less work on the tiller, but it'll still work. I'm going to do it anyhow. And just because I have, these raised rows, I won't need to till them a whole lot. Just really a couple passes over it to mix in the compost and break the soil up is really all I need. So that's about it. A few notes on safety on using a tiller, especially these kinds that has the backwards spinning rotation. When they get over something like a rock or a heavy root in the soil, they'll kick like a horse, and this back end will rise up. And you gotta be really careful, because they can kick up, the tiller can jolt forward. The slower you till stuff and tilling it thoroughly down, the less chance you're going to catch something that hard. But always when you're walking behind your tiller, never put your chin and face in between these handles, because that could come up and break your jaw. And that's happened to quite a few people throughout the years, for farmers that got their jaws broke by these handles right here. And of course, when you're tilling a row, can hang up to one side and just follow beside the tiller. Just, you know, be aware to keep your hand on it, so if it tries to get away, it's not going to go very far. These tillers are so strong that I know one person that had their tiller get away from them, and it got up against the side of a shed and started actually pushing the shed off its own foundation. So, yeah, be aware that these things are heavy-duty equipment that can injure you badly if you don't respect it and do things properly. And there you have it. You can see nice, loose, well-draining soil. Still has some clay in it, but you know, what are you gonna do? It'll probably take like 5 or more years of adding compost to it to get that clay aspect out, but you can see it's still nice and homogeneous, no big chunks. I'll take a hoe and kind of scrape up the sides a little bit and clean it up. Something too, you know, if you notice I have this landscape fabric right over there. Don't be tilling up next to any kind of fabric or something you're going to catch with the tines, unless you're an experienced person like I am. Otherwise, you'll catch it in there, then you're going to be spending a long amount of time cutting out landscape fabric or rope or, you know, something like that that you've put on the ground and haven't thought about. Something else too, you might be asking, why do I even bother tilling up my rows anyhow, since they're raised rows and raised beds? You don't have to till. Well, it's true, you don't have to till up raised rows and raised beds because there's no soil compaction from the sides. You just pull up your old plants from the previous year and do a rotation. By the way, I do rotate my stuff. This bed over here was lettuce last year. But I find that tilling it up is very beneficial because, one, it's going to break the soil up even more. So, you know, even though it's just the soil sitting out here with the rain on it, gives some compaction to it. And plus, you know, probably throughout the year you stepped on it or kneeled on it while you worked around it. And also too, when you add the new compost to it, it really mixes it in and provides thorough nutrition to all areas of the soil where the plant roots can go. And when you blend the compost in that efficiently, you're also destroying any of the old roots of the plants that were in there from last year. You know, roots that could be rotting out and causing disease, even though it's not similar species. If you have a lot of plant material that's just rotting in the field, it'll, you know, be a problem for all of your plants. But by introducing fresh compost, you're introducing fresh bacterial species, fresh mold species, yeast species, and all these good beneficial microbes that you've gotten out of your fully composted material will get in there and eat up and pretty much outnumber any of the rotting material and disease material. So I think it's good to just till it up every year. It looks really nice, and I guarantee you'll get better results.